Chapter 4. The Carew murder case. So straight away, this is the big bit, right? Now we don't know who Carew is, but we'll find out as we go through. Nearly a year later, okay, so we talked about time passing. So time passes. So Jekyll says, please don't talk about Hyde, and Utterson keeps his promise. So there's nothing for a year. Hyde vanishes. Nearly a year later, in the month of October 18, whenever, London was startled by a crime of singular ferocity and rendered all the more notable by the high position of the victim. So singular, this is a very Victorian word. So singular means that it is one of a kind. Okay, ferocity is violence. So there's a crime that happens that startles the population. Okay, it's almost unbelievably violent. They've never seen something as violent before. But notice also, the victim is of a high position. So it's somebody who is famous / privileged. Now the truth is, in this world, how much someone cares about your death is linked to how important you are. If you're upper class, your death is more important than if you're working class. A lot of people died very young. But when a rich person dies, problem. The details were few and startling. A maidservant living alone in a house not far from the river had gone upstairs to bed about 11. Although a fog rolled over the city, there's a lot of this. So the fog is very often made by pollution. So London was very dark and it was very sort of foggy. Although a fog rolled over the city in the small hours, the early part of the night was cloudless, and the lane, which the maid's window overlooked, was brilliantly lit by the full moon. It seemed she was romantically given, for she sat down upon her box, which stood immediately under the window, and fell into a dream of musing. Now, this book only has 2 women in it, and neither is a particularly fair example. So this is one of the women in the book. She is a maid, and they describe her as being sort of dreaming and romantic. So she's a bit of a sort of a fantasy world kind of person. So the question we ask ourselves is, can we trust what she says? Okay. She used to say, with streaming tears, she gets emotional as well, when she narrated the experience, never felt more at peace with all men, or thought more kindly of the world, right? And as she so sat, she became aware of an aged and beautiful gentleman, so a beautiful old man, with white hair, drawing near along the lane, and advancing to meet him, another very small gentleman, to whom she at first paid less attention. Now this, if you like, is a little bit of a mirror, please have this down, of chapter 1. Who is the small man? Mr. Hyde, yes, thank you. So if you remember, chapter 1 has Hyde walking and a little girl walking, and they meet and he crushes her, right? So you have young little girl, sort of innocent in society. What you've now got is Mr. Hyde walking down a lane, about to meet a very old man, right? White hair, beautiful, aged. So you've got the same thing happening again. Okay? Now, we know what happened with the little girl, so we can probably guess what's going to happen with the old man. When they had come within speech, okay, so when they are close, which was just under the maid's eyes, the old man bowed and accosted the other with a very pretty manner of politeness. So he bows to accost means to speak. He bows and he speaks politely. Okay, politely. It did not seem as if the subject of his address were of great importance. Indeed, from his pointing, it sometimes appeared as if he were only inquiring his way. So asking for directions. But the moon shone on his face as he spoke, and the girl was pleased to watch it. It seemed to breathe such an innocent and old-world kindness of disposition. Yet with something high too, as of a well-founded self-content. So he's a nice man. We can also assume that he's probably a rich man, because he has kind of manners. But she sees his face, he looks nice. He looks like a nice man, right? Old world, kind, good looking. Presently, her eye wandered to the other. She was surprised to recognise him, a certain Mr. Hyde. Now notice, here, he's got a reputation, right? How does the maid know about him? Everyone's talking about him, right? Presently her eye wandered to the other, as she was surprised to recognise him, a certain Mr. Hyde, who had once visited her master, and for whom she conceived a dislike. So she didn't like him either. He had in his hand a heavy cane, with which he was trifling. But he answered never a word, and seemed to listen with an ill-contained impatience. So he's got a great big cane, like a walking cane, a big stick. And then, all of a sudden, he broke out in a great flame. He broke out in a great flame of anger, stamping with his foot, brandishing the cane, and carrying on, as the maid described it, like a madman. So the old man comes up to him and he goes, hello, bows. We don't know what they talked about, but he says from the way he was pointing, he's asking directions. Hyde starts stamping his foot, brandishing the cane above his head. Right? So you've got a real juxtaposition here between these two people, the politeness and the rudeness of Hyde. The old gentleman took a step back, with the air of one very much surprised and a trifle hurt. And at that Mr. Hyde broke out of all bounds and clubbed him to the earth. So he takes the stick and he batters him to the ground. The next moment, with ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows, under which the bones were audibly shattered, and the body jumped upon the roadway. At the horror of these sights and sounds, the maid fainted. Okay, so these are kind of our key bits here, right, of the violence. So what you have here is a kind of a senseless violence. Key quotes for me. So batters him, so beats him to the ground, stamps on his body with his foot, okay, behaves like a madman. You've got ape-like fury, which I think is quite deliberate. There's ape-like fury. Here we go. Okay, clubbed him to the ground, ape-like fury, trampled his victim under his foot, so he's trampling him and he's smashing him, right? Hits him so hard that the bones audibly shatter. So you can hear the man's bones snap and break. Okay, at which point the maid faints, which is so horrifying. Okay. Now, that's kind of the key bit, if you like, of sort of Hyde's like animalistic violence. Okay. Before we carry on, quick question for you. What do you think's really happened here? Like, I would ask the question, why is this old man, hold on, why is this old man wandering around at night, goes up to another man, and that man beats him to death? What do you think? I'll give you a chance to chat about it. What do you think? Any theories? Any theories? Sophie, you had a theory. What's your theory?
I just thought they would have a disagreement, but also because you don't know who the old man is.
We're about to find out in a second. So yeah, they've had a disagreement for sure. We can add that down. So there's definitely been a disagreement. Any theories? Yeah? Maybe. You're also innocent, right? An old man wandering around at night, excuse me, approaching a young man.
Hyde like he took over.
That does happen. That does happen. Like he goes mad and beats the guy to death. Yeah. I think that maybe what you have here is potentially a sexual proposition. Right? Question mark. Because the question I would ask is, why is this old man walking around in the middle of the night? Why does he go up to this other person? Okay, he says that maybe he's asking directions, but we don't know. But there's a possibility that you have another example of maybe sort of like undercurrent sort of sexual nature thing going on. Okay, I don't know. It was 2 o'clock when she came to herself, and it was 2 o'clock when she came to herself and called for the police. The murderer was gone long ago, but there lay his victim in the middle of the lane, incredibly mangled. Okay. A mangle is the thing you use to dry clothes, where you like run clothes through like 2 cylinders. So his body looks like it's been crushed almost to like a flat pancake. Okay. The stick with which the deed had been done, although it was of some rare, very tough and heavy wood, had broken the middle under the stress of this insensate cruelty. So he's hit him so hard that the stick itself has snapped in 2. And one splintered half had rolled into the neighbouring gutter. Now, of course, this becomes evidence. This is the murder weapon. The other, without doubt, had been carried away by the murderer. A purse and a gold watch were found upon the victim. Why does that matter? Yeah, Ruth? This is the theory. So you have the id, that is like your raw emotion. You have the super ego, which is like social rules that you've learnt, and you have the ego, which controls the 2. So your ego, which is the Greek for I, is the part of you which is always deciding between whether you should follow the rules or follow your emotions. Okay. Why does this matter? Yeah, this is important, right? It's not a robbery. So this is the issue, right? So if it was a robbery, it would make sense. But the fact that he leaves behind the gold watch means that the murder makes no sense. Now, if you told a Victorian person, oh, a poor man killed him and stole his money, they go, okay, that makes sense, right? Poor people do that, or might do that. But the fact that he kills him and leaves the money there means that there's no point in the murder. And that's much more scary, right? To believe that you could be killed for no reason is much more scary to the audience than the theft is. A personal gold watch were found upon the victim, but no cards or papers, except a sealed and stamped envelope. So again, this here makes me suggest that he's up to something suspicious, right? Why would the man have no papers on him? He doesn't want to be identified. A sealed and stamped envelope, which he had been probably carrying in the post, which bore the name and address of Mr. Utterson. So he's holding an envelope with Utterson's name on it. This was brought to the lawyer the next morning, before he was out of bed, and he had no sooner seen it and been told the circumstances, then he shot out of a solemn lip. I shall say nothing until I have seen the body, said he. This may be very serious. Now again, what you should be thinking is, someone's dead, right? Isn't that serious? So he says it might be serious because the man might be important. So in this society, again, your murder only matters if you matter, right? Like if one of you guys died, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But if I died, wow, yeah, serious, yeah. This may be very serious. Have the kindness to wait while I dress. And with the same grave countenance, he hurried through his breakfast and drove to the police station, whither the body had been carried. I like that he still has his breakfast. He's like, oh my God, a murder! We've got to get there quickly, as soon as I have my breakfast. Right? Never skip breakfast, most important meal of the day. Drove to the police station, whither the body had been carried. As soon as he came into the cell, he nodded. Yes, said he. I recognise him. I am sorry to say this is Sir Danvers Carew. Okay, notice please, the Sir means that he is upper class. Okay, he has been knighted, so he is somebody of the old establishment. Good God, sir! Exclaimed the officer. Is it possible? Could a man of this status be murdered? And the next moment, his eye lighted up with professional ambition. Right? So he thinks to himself, ooh, this case could make my career. Right? If I solve the murder of Carew, I could become promoted. This will make a great deal of noise, he said, and perhaps you can help us to the man.
Oh, what does it say next to the profession?
It says career, okay, or promotion. Yeah, sorry. There you go. Perhaps you can help us to the man. He briefly narrated what the maid had seen and showed the broken stick. Mr. Utterson had quailed at the name of Hyde, but then the stick was laid before him. He could doubt no longer. Broken and battered as it was, he recognised it for one that he himself had presented many years for Henry Jekyll. So it is Jekyll's stick that Hyde uses. Is this Mr. Hyde a person of small stature? He inquired. Particularly small and particularly wicked looking is what the maid calls him, said the officer. Mr. Utterson reflected, raising his head. If you will come with me in my cab, he said, I think I can take you to his house. It was by this time about 9 in the morning, and the first fog of the season. This is some good quotes for London, by the way. A great chocolate-covered pall lowered over heaven. Now, a pall is a kind of like pollution cloud. So it's 9 in the morning, and the fog is rolling in, and the fog is brown, chocolate-coloured. So it's dirty fog. But the wind was continually charging and rooting these embattled vapours, so that as the cab crawled from street to street, Mr. Utterson beheld a marvellous number of degrees and hues of twilight. And they like to talk about twilight because twilight is duality. Twilight is the move between day and night. Lots of things happen dawn and dusk. Okay, so you've got dawn, which is night turning into day, and you've got dusk, which is day turning into night. For here it will be dark, like the back end of evening. There will be a glow of rich, lurid brown, the light of some strange conflagration. And here for a moment the fog will be quite broken up, and the haggard shaft of daylight will glance between the swirling reefs. It's a nice line, right? Shaft of daylight will glance between the swirling reefs. So you've got like fog and mist and the sun sort of shining through. It's all a bit creepy. The dismal quarter of Soho, seen under these changing glimpses, which had never been extinguished or been kindled afresh to combat this mournful vision, reinvasion of darkness, seemed in the lawyer's eye like a district of some city in a nightmare. Okay, now Soho was very famous for being quite sort of a sinful place. Famous for, I'm going to put sin, because we wouldn't say it was sinful now, but in Soho you're going to find brothels, you'll find bars, you'll find casinos, right? It's the place they all went. So Hyde lives in Soho. He says it's like a city of a nightmare. The thoughts of his mind, besides, were of gloomiest dye, and when he glanced at the companion of his drive, he was conscious of some touch of terror of the law and the law's officers, which at times assails the most honest. Okay, so it has a kind of intense, I guess it's quite intense atmosphere. So they're driving to get Hyde, they're driving to get the murderer. As the cab drew up before the address indicated, the fog lifted a little and showed him a dingy street. This is really good stuff for like the dark side of London. A dingy street, a gin palace, a low French eating house, a shop for the retail of penny numbers and twopenny salads, many ragged children huddled in the doorways, and many women of different nationalities passing out, keen hand to have a morning glass. The next moment, so this is what you got, right? So Gin Palace is like a bar. You've got a French eating house, right? Which is kind of a bit of a slang for like a brothel, right? Like a place that you would go for like to eat, but that's not what you're really doing. Okay, it's like a front. Ragged children, so you've got poverty as well. And you've got women of different nationalities, right? So this is part of that whole like immigration, urbanization thing. So different people. So there's lots of foreigners there. So it all feels quite alien feel. The fog settled upon that part as brown as umber, and cut him off from his blackguardly surroundings. This was the home of Henry Jekyll's favourite, a man who is the heir to £250,000 sterling. £250,000. So Jekyll's fortune is 200,000, okay, pounds, which we know from doing our maths. If £100 is 20 grand, so times that by 20, and that's Jekyll's fortune. Okay, so we're talking about 5 mil. Okay, of course this is Hyde. So Hyde chooses to live in Soho because Soho is where he can do all of his dirty Hyde behaviour. And here's the second woman. So the first woman is a sort of like emotional maid. The second woman is an evil landlady. An ivory-faced and silvery-haired old woman opened the door. She had an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. Yes, she said, this was Mr. Hyde's, but he was not at home. He'd been in that night very late, but had gone away again less than an hour. Okay, so he got in very late, and he stayed for 1 hour, then he left again. Gone away by less than an hour. There was nothing strange in that. His habits were very irregular, and he was often absent. Okay. For instance, it was nearly 2 months since she had seen him till yesterday. So he has mysterious behaviour. Okay. Please remember, this is not Jekyll's house. This is Hyde's own house. This is Hyde's house. Okay. This is the address that he gives Utterson. So remember, in case you're confused, In chapter 2, he gives his address to Utterson, and this is the address Utterson has. Very well then, we wish to see his rooms, said the lawyer. And when the woman began to declare it was impossible, I had better tell you who this person is, he added. This is Inspector Newcomen of Scotland Yard. A flash of odious joy appeared upon the woman's face. Ah, said she, he is in trouble. What has he done? Mr. Utterson and the inspector exchanged glances. He don't seem a very popular character. No, not at this point. And now, my good woman, just let me and this gentleman have a look about us. In the whole extent of the house, which but for the old woman remained otherwise empty, Mr. Hyde had only used a couple of rooms, but these were furnished with luxury and good taste. Who's that the opposite of? Utterson, right? He is a man who lives for pleasure, right? Luxury, taste. A closet was filled with wine. Filled with wine. Filled with wine. The plate was of silver, the napery elegant, a good picture hung upon the walls, a gift, as Utterson supposed, from Henry Jekyll, who was much of a connoisseur. So that means an expert in art. So Utterson doesn't think that Hyde can be an expert in art because he's Hyde. He must have been given it. And the carpets were of many plies and agreeable in colour. So this is all about money, right? At this moment, however, the rooms were bore every mark of having been recently and hurriedly ransacked. Clothes lay about the floor with their pockets inside out. Lock-fast drawers stood open, and on the hearth, which is the fire, there lay a pile of grey ashes. And though many disinterred, the butt end, many papers have been burned. From these embers, there's expected to disinterred the butt end of a green chequebook, which had resisted the action of the fire. The other half of the stick was found behind the door. And as this clinched his suspicions, the officer declared himself delighted. So they have the proof, but he's tried to burn evidence. A visit to the bank, where several £1,000s were found to be lying to the murderer's credit, completed his gratification. Okay. So he's trying to do a runner, isn't he? Right? He's doing a runner. So he knows he's been caught. He's burnt the evidence. He's tried to take all his money out of the bank. You may depend upon it, sir, he told Mr. Utterson. I have him in my hand. He must have lost his head, or he never would have left the stick, or above all, burned the chequebook. Why? Money's life to the man. Money's life to the man. We have nothing to do but wait for him at the bank and give out the handbills. Okay? So he says they're going to try and trap him. This last, however, was not so easy of accomplishment, for Mr. Hyde had numbered few familiars. Even the master of the servant maid had only seen him twice. His family could nowhere be traced. He had never been photographed. And the few who could describe him differed widely, as common observers will. Only on one point were they all agreed, and that was the haunting sense of unexpressed deformity with which the fugitive impressed his beholders. End of chapter. So now he is a criminal. Okay, and he is on the run. He's on the run.